all of it to me comes from this core of I have a deep understanding of who my potential customers are, where they participate online, what messages resonate with them and don't. And if you don't have that, how the frick are you ever going to figure it out, right? Like for years, for like 20 years, man, I was like, oh my God, exene, I was the hammer. And I thought every marketing problem was an SEO nail that I could just like rank for, right?
The Blowing Up Brands podcast is a running conversation covering brand strategy, demand gen, DEI, unconventional ideas, and unforgettable stories with a whole range of experts, influencers, and other interesting and entertaining characters. Enjoy.
Hey Rand, how's it going?
Good, exene. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. It's great to have you on again in a very new iteration of a Renoun Creative podcast. It's been a couple years and a lot of things have changed. Some not so much, but it's a pleasure to connect with you again.
Yeah, great to be here.
So for first things first, right? For viewers, listeners who might not be familiar, why don't you just kind of introduce yourself and give us the elevator pitch, as it were?
Sure. Yeah. So let's see. I got into digital marketing, starting a company in 2001 when I dropped out of college, initially called SEO Moz, and then it became Moz. It started as an SEO consulting company and then became a software company, and is relatively well known in sort of the SEO world, especially from the kind of 2001 to 2018 era. I left that company and started another one in 2018 called SparkToro, which is what I run today. SparkToro is an audience research company, so helping marketers, market researchers, educational folks, folks in government, all kinds of people discover the sources of influence of their audience that might sit outside of search. And we have some search offerings and search features as well, but that is our primary goal is to help people do audience research, uncover the demographics and behaviors of any online group of folks. I also, exene, I'm not sure if I mentioned this too, but I also run a video game studio.
Oh shit! No.
Yeah. And working on its first game, which has not been announced yet. So I don't have anything to share on that front, but it's very exciting. Every morning I wake up to like new art from the artists and new ideas from the game designer, and get to participate in the indie video game space, which is a fascinating ecosystem. Tons to learn there. Very, very different kind of marketing than B2B SaaS world, which has been my last two companies. And I also wrote a book called Lost and Founder, a painfully honest field guide to the startup world, which has resonated with a lot of folks. It's sort of an emotional and vulnerable journey through building Moz, trying to build a venture-backed venture scale business and kind of failing, right? Moz got to about $50 million in revenue before it plateaued and I left the company. So not a success by almost all human standards, but not by venture capital standards.
Right. Yeah, that's a different kind of success than most of us are ever going to be familiar with. Awesome. Yeah, that the video now my brain is sidetracked on the video game thing. Can you reveal what style of game it is?
Sure. Yeah, it's a top-down chill action RPG.
Okay.
In which you play an Italian chef in sort of a magical version of 1960s Italy who goes out and forages and hunts in the rural wilds around your little hilltop village, and you come back every night and you cook for the people of the town, and you can use the lira that you make, the old Italian currency, to sort of upgrade your character in your restaurant. And there's lots of secrets and side quests and plots and NPCs and all that kind of fun stuff. A little bit in the vein of Supergiant's Hades, but a more chill version of that.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, That's unique. Oh man, that would be a whole different, video game marketing. It's funny
Yes.
because we have
Fascinating, like
yeah,
totally fascinating
it's
world,
a,
very, very different. And I think, this speaks to kind of a lot of the topics that we're going to get into around
yeah.
audience research, which is that I'll give you an example. Moz grew dramatically on the back of content and SEO, right? It had essentially that flywheel. I would write blog posts for the first like 7 years. I wrote a blog post every night, 5 nights a week, right? And those blog posts ranked in Google for all sorts of terms and phrases that marketers were searching for, businesses were searching for. And so Moz became popular through being found in Google. And then, of course, like the market kind of shifted, right? So people still search for SEO information through Google. Absolutely. That hasn't changed. But many people determine, which experts they're going to use, which software they're going to use through recommendations that are in social media or in content that they consume through newsletters or in word of mouth or at conferences and events or all these other pathways, right? So SEO is broadened dramatically as a field, I mean.
Yeah.
Search is only one of the channels. In indie video games, if you were to go back in time 15 years ago, ranking on one of the top lists, PC Gamer's top 10 games of 2010 or 2005 or something like that, could get you a lot of people buying your game. Today, no, right? Like, it's not that search is useless, but I can't think of a single keyword where if our video games homepage ranked for that keyword, we would get lots of sales. Not a one, right? And so it's a really, really different exercise in understanding, right? I have to dig into, well, who's the audience that buys indie video games? Who might be interested in a video game about, cooking in 1960s Italy, who's interested in the action RPG genre, who likes sort of, story-led games, who's bought these kinds of games in the past, what are their demographics and behaviors, where do they learn about new games, how can I be present in those places where they learn about games, all that stuff, right? And that is a completely different beast than when I'm marketing SparkToro or when I used to market Moz, or if I help a friend of mine is launching a new knife company and I'm like, trying to help him out. And I was talking with a woman who runs a fascinating website called Vacation with an Artist. And the idea is that you can go book a vacation with a, famous Japanese printmaker in Kyoto and learn to do Japanese style prints at their studio for a week. And what an incredible business, right? And she works with, hundreds of artists all around the world and awesome, really interesting business, totally different marketing than any of these other ones. And all of it to me comes from this core of, I have a deep understanding of who my potential customers are, where they participate online, what messages resonate with them and don't. And if you don't have that, how the frick are you ever going to figure it out, right? For 20 years, man, I was like, oh my God, exene, I was the hammer. And I thought every marketing problem was an SEO nail that I could just rank for, right?
No. And one of the things too is, and you mentioned, you're talking to obviously a very different crowd than with Moz and with SparkToro. And there's a specific nature to that. It's a marketer marketing to marketers for both of those products.
For both those.
Which you see a lot in the social spaces and the LinkedIn, and I is a great example to use because he just became kind of giant all over the place. But having done a few events and had some conversations with Chris Walker, right? Love the content. I agree with at least 80% of everything that he's putting out into the world. And I don't know that, except for maybe in B2B SaaS specific realms where the same channels work, that everything that is getting said actually translates if you're not marketing to marketers in that space, right? Have a podcast and do it this way and then show up, 5 days a week on LinkedIn and stuff like this and then replicate it. Does that work? And, hopefully, right, the best marketers out of us are good at finding who the actual audience is, even when that's out of our own wheelhouse, which doesn't get demonstrated a lot in the stuff that we see every day, because those folks are marketers marketing to marketers.
Yep, fair enough. I'm actually not familiar with Chris Walker's work. maybe I've seen it only in passing, but anyway, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, no, I recommend it. Refine Labs. They blew
Oh
up.
yeah, okay.
From like
Refine. I've seen their stuff.
Pandemic stuff. We had a couple online
Yeah.
events, and I was like, no, this guy's got it right, and he got it right for sure, right? But just like stuff I've put out there, just a lot of people I listen to, I'm listening to them because they're speaking to my concerns, and
Yes.
you can't just copy that and hope that it works.
Which I actually think this is a great thing, right? So I discovered a guy, Simon Carless, who runs Game Discover Co., which is a newsletter he puts out a couple of times a week. And there's like a premium version that you can subscribe to. He has access to a bunch of data from like Steam and the Nintendo Switch store. And he puts out like all this fascinating information about how to market games, which games are successful and why. He digs into it. If you're not in the game space, why would you ever subscribe to his stuff? But if you are in the game space, I think you're crazy not to. And this is, I think, the power of specialization, right? Simon has a deep understanding of his audience, people who make games, right? And they subscribe to him. He is targeting exactly that audience as well. He should be, right? I think it's wonderful to pick a specialization and be sort of the best in a small pond. That is a fantastic way to build a career. And to be known for something, right? When people talk about games marketing, his name comes up all the time. When people hear that, people in the games world are like, oh, Simon, right? Like you had lunch with him at PAX and you worked with him at like, okay, now your legitimacy rises in their eyes, right? It's, I think the same thing is almost certainly true in like B2B SaaS marketing. And if you follow, Chris Walker or somebody like that, right? Or Amanda Natividad, right? From SparkToro, like people are like, oh, okay, that person, you're like in this world, you're in this space. I get it. Fantastic. But
it makes sense.
Trying to appeal to everybody is a recipe for disaster, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, and tactics in particular, right? I mean, some fundamentals are so fundamental that they should always be applied. But tactics, the smaller you're getting, then the more likely that maybe that's not a good fit here. I mean, we still use Pinterest for certain clients, right? And it works. I got personally, I wouldn't have known it fucking existed still, if not for my team finding that and saying, oh, look, here's the audience, and like doing it.
We got 2 requests recently to put more Pinterest data into SparkToro because some marketers in some niches, Pinterest is huge. A friend of ours is an interior designer down in Portland, Oregon. And she's like, oh my God, what Pinterest is, that's everything. That's how we all get all of our business. And we work with that for all of our clients, and everybody builds a Pinterest board. And what do you talk, there's billions of dollars of commerce flowing through Pinterest. It just might not be in your sector. And this is also true for whatever, Instagram is true for TikTok. It's true for a place like ArtStation or Behance or Fiverr or, whatever, right? Like if you can think of those platforms as irrelevant to you, they're relevant to somebody.
Otherwise they wouldn't exist anymore, right? Someone's on them still. All right, good. So let's get headlining. You're someone who came from SEO, as you explained already, and have certainly, let's call it diversified, would be like the light version, right? Checked out some different directions, found some different things, avenues. So are we ready to say, as marketers love to say about things, that SEO is dead?
Let's see. I think what's dead is the era when SEO was such a massive dominant channel for internet commerce that you could basically ignore every other one and be okay in 80 or 90% of digital marketing fields. That era is dead. SEO is not dead. I mean, SEO is still much bigger than Pinterest, and Pinterest is by no means dead, like we just talked about, right? So what I don't think is true is that I think anyone who says SEO is dead is just baiting, right? Like they just want attention. And that's fine. Like that's a journalistic tactic that's worked for a long time, unfortunately, and lots of people buy into that kind of crappy clickbait. But I also think folks who say SEO is as big as it's ever been because they point to the number of searches performed on Google each year or each month.
Right.
And that has not declined, right? It has generally gone up. It's plateaued in growth, definitely the last few years. It might have declined a little bit this year from the last two because COVID kept everybody at home, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But it's absolutely the case that what has changed is what's being searched for and how search fits into the marketing journey or customer journey. So whereas I like to put it this way, right? From 2005 to certainly 2012, 13 even, almost everyone started and had the middle of their journeys accompanied by Google, right? When I'm first investigating a space, I'm first trying to learn about something, I start with Google. And then as I am progressing in my journey, I go back to Google. And at the end of my journey, I probably go to Google again. And there might be a bunch of sources in between there. What's shifted is Google is almost always right at the end of the journey now, and much less overwhelmingly powerful and strong at the start and middle of journeys. For example, right, when I started diving into indie video games, I went to the subreddits for video games. Like that was my starting point. Participating in those communities, I learned about some other sites. I found Game Discover Co. I found gamesindustry.biz. Right, these places that were getting referenced. And I was participating in the conversations on Twitter before Elon Kill did, and and on LinkedIn, I started connecting with folks in the game space and all that. Occasionally, along the way, I would Google someone or some brand. Right, I'd use Google navigationally to get to the places that I was hearing about, to learn about something that I had learned about somewhere else or found the name of. I'm like, oh, okay, you know what? I should probably download Unity and check out that game engine, learn a little bit about it. Okay, Unity tutorial, right? Like, yeah, Google's absolutely in the mix.
Yeah.
But it's not 80 or 90% of the journey anymore. And this is, I think, the challenge for a lot of marketers who still see Google in their referrals, still see those keywords getting searched for, and assume that very little has changed. But the zeitgeist of how people use Google is so much more navigational now. And brand centric, right? And you see this in Google's data, right? So, 10 years ago, the diversity of websites that received traffic from Google was extraordinary, right? Like Google was really an example of the long tail on the web. And now, I think it's 50% plus of all search clicks, organic search clicks, go to like about 3,000 websites.
Yeah. Well, and I think it was, and I saw this in a few places, and one of them might have been yours, that 2/3, at least in some period of time, 2/3 of Google results, people would search something and never leave Google, right? Because Google has just stacked up its own answers. It's pulling snippets, it's showing videos. So you go to YouTube, it's showing a bunch of things, and then giving you additional questions. I mean, you can spend 15 minutes right on that search page and never go anywhere.
Yeah, which as a consumer is quite convenient. And as someone who would like to see many small businesses succeed instead of one gigantic, monopoly consolidate all wealth and power,
they need the money.
Very disheartening.
And just another, right, it just pushes back against that. Well, more people are searching on Google. Like, it doesn't matter, right? Like 1/3 of them are getting off of Google. And so especially if you're not in the top 3 organic results, if you don't happen to push past the ads, the videos, the snippets, then the additional questions, and then maybe on scrolling, you get to the top 3 organic results. And if you're not in the top 3, which some mill has probably got you beat and you'll never actually be able to get ahead of them, then like, unless you find someone who goes to multiple pages or whatever they call the pageless version now, then you'll never probably get seen there, right? A small business, maybe, again, if you've got some kind of power, you got some juice behind you, but like, we work a lot in the world of mid, let's say very like small to small mid-sized businesses. They're regional, they're kind of old school, often professional services, those kinds of things. And unless you've got a very niche term, right? That you're just like, there's just no volume whatsoever. If you got anything general whatsoever, it's very hard to show up anywhere near that front page.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if I were putting on my SEO hat, what I'd say is the solution to a lot of this is two things. It's zero-click SEO.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get my brand, the answers that I want to appear in the, in the instant answers that Google gives, right? So when you ask for, go into the B2B SaaS space, right? Best CRMs for real estate agents. How do I get into that list of, the first 4 or 5 brands that Google lists in there, so that hopefully people start to associate, oh yeah, okay, I've seen them somewhere, and I want to get into that. How do you get into the generative search results that Google is proposing to put into their search engine in the future, right? And obviously that's a big kind of content and PR play, right?
Yeah.
And then I think the other one is Barnacle SEO. So rather than me ranking with my website for something, I barnacle onto someone who already ranks well for it, and I try to be in their article, listicle, piece, mention on their site, advertise on their site, sponsor their site.
A review site, an aggregator.
Yeah, whatever it is, right? Like, oh, I see that this domain ranks really well for these types of queries. When I want to rank well for that query, SparkToro is never going to rank for it, right? Like, we're just too small. We're not going to, but you know what? I could, do a partnership with, Marketing Land or Ad Age, or, I'll write a guest column for Ad Age, and that'll get me into the results that I'm looking for, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's set aside SEO for a moment then, if not permanently. Knowing that it's part of the mix, right? In a way that, sure, people will use it as they're looking through, as they're on their journey, on their customer journey, right? They're going to use it like you described for certain aspects, more kind of tangential. What is that? Let me go look at this, or then maybe once then they forget, they get distracted, the classic internet, like you leave and then later you come back after a prompt and then what was that again? And you do a branded search, which of course gets attributed as SEO, like out of nowhere, magic. So if we understand currently that search is a tool inside of a journey, what can marketers be doing in the land of content, and all the things that could mean besides maybe billboards, right? Like it's all kind of content, right? So the written, whether it is the blog post, whether it's video, whether it's like social content, like what can marketers and businesses be doing to put themselves in a position of being found, given how people are looking for stuff now?
Yeah, I think, exene, I think this goes back to what we first talked about, which is rather than saying, what are all the options out there? You should ask the question, where does my audience participate and learn about things in my sector for my product and brand? And that's at the core of like why I think audience research is so valuable and so important. And that process is essentially it's surveys, interviews, and passively collected data at scale, right? So essentially you can survey your audience and you can sort of ask them about, hey, which social networks do you use? And people are not terrible about answering that question. That's like reasonable. You could get reasonable data from a survey. When you interview people, you'll almost certainly discover interesting sources, right? Like you'll talk to somebody and you'll say, oh yeah, how did you like learn about this space, or how'd you get into it? And they'll tell you some sources. There'll be bias in there, right? And you got to get a sizable sample size before you can do it. And then you can go collect, passive data at scale, which is essentially, if you were to imagine the manual version of this would be like, oh, I'm going to go visit 500 people in my field's LinkedIn page and their Twitter page and their Instagram page. I'm going to look at everything that they follow. I'm going to crawl all of those. I'm going to download it into a giant Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to crunch the numbers and be like, okay, these are the 50 sources of influence that are really powerful on the social web. And then I'm going to, maybe buy a bunch of clickstream data from Datos or SimilarWeb or somebody like that. And I'm going to look for everybody who visited the sites and profiles of those and what else they visit. And now I'm going to get, okay, now I have a really complete understanding of like the ecosystem of this space, how people engage here. I don't recommend that anyone do all of that. Like that's extremely expensive, super time consuming. When Casey and I saw people doing this, like agencies were spending 6 figures plus to get one report where it was like, here's a list of the things people in this audience pay attention to. We were like, well, we should just build that for the whole internet. So anyway, now you can do that through a tool like SparkToro or one of its competitors like Audience does this with an S, or Helixa.ai, or Brandwatch has an enterprise version that's very expensive but very good. So you can do these kinds of things, through a third-party data provider or tool, and add that onto your surveys and interviews, and now you get like a really complete picture. And so instead of saying, what are all the places, what are all the ways that I could do content marketing? What are all the places I could do social media marketing? And you instead say, what are the right few places for me to have the biggest impact? Because I think in almost every sector, 20% of all the potential sources have 80% of the value. And you should probably participate in those unless you're really excellent and outstanding at one of those tertiary, quaternary, spaces. And okay, maybe you build your little niche. You're like, well, not many people use Pinterest to learn about, I don't know, book marketing, but like I do. And because of that, I really appeal to this little group that uses Pinterest.
Yeah. Oh, Pinterest. Okay. And I love how these conversations always, the answers sound so no shit, right? Like when we say this stuff out loud, right? Because it's, and it's every time it's just like, well, here's what we want to do. We want to really identify who our customer is and then where they're getting their information and then be there, right? And so it's like,
what else is marketing? Marketing is just
it's always been that. Now where they are is extremely diverse now, right? And then so that's the difficulty, is finding where they are and then understanding what it is they want to do at various stages of the journey is the other piece, right? So that piece kind of comes back to, I think maybe right around the time that I reached out to you this time was you would put out something about, again, SEO keywords, search centric content versus business goal content, which I think blends here nicely, because cool, I can know where they are and I can show up there maybe, right? But then I still have to be relevant. I have to be saying something that's useful for them, maybe some things that are useful not just in a way that like serves me as the thing that I'm selling, right? But like just being useful and being then liked, trusted, and respected, and kind of, again, all the old cliches, but the content version, right? Cross as a partner.
What's interesting is like I think we use trusted or reliable or useful as markers that we often think of as being the right kinds of things, but there are plenty of businesses whose content doesn't do any of those, and yet they have success. So again, I think this is part of the audience research, especially the surveys and interviews. You need to find what resonates with your audience, and in some spaces that's not reliable and trustworthy. It's low cost and accessible,
right?
Or it is popular, or it's hip. It's like it's stylish. It's in the zeitgeist. It's what's hot right now, and that moves, whatever units of blue jeans far more than denim is not reliability and quality. That's the thing that you should be. No. Right. Yeah. No. Like I would argue in almost every fashion space, it has nothing to do with quality, trust, reliability. It is almost exclusively about placement, right? Like where do you sit in the zeitgeist? How popular are you with the right audiences? And are you getting featured in the right kinds of places, stages, movies, television, film, influencers, posts, like all that kind of stuff, right?
That's my B2B bias. Sean.
It's
the words I'm using.
It's all of our biases, like, and we cannot escape it. Like when I look at video games that I like, I think, oh well, that's why it sold well. get out of here, right? You cannot rely on the thing that you believe as an individual human. You have to go learn what works in that market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So pulling aside any assumptions about what works in a hypothetical market for what we're going to talk about here, right? So in a general sense, assuming we have found the audience, or we think we found where the audience is, we think we have found, the type of content that probably, like the form, right? The form of content that makes the most sense given these places that they are, which, right? I mean, that could be a talk on a stage, and it could be a blog post. I mean, everything from old school.
It could be a post, a visual post on Instagram, or a 20-second video on TikTok.
Be like, depending on where they are. If they're at a conference, then some blog post might not be it, right? So like it's, we're assuming, so we know that, we know form. What goes into it next, generally? If I'm trying to think about business goal centric, I'm trying to like think about what it is they're trying to do. What do I want to be thinking about as I generate my content strategy and my content planning?
Yeah, so I think this process of like tying together, I have a business goal that I'm trying to accomplish, and that goal could be more sales from existing customers. Or it could be more referrals, or more signups to our email newsletter, or we're trying to reach a new market that we've never reached before with a slight twist on a product that we already have that we think is going to be a really good match, right? So like any of these could be could be the business goal. And then it's about tying the marketing channels, the tactics, the content itself, the placement of that content, the messaging style in a way that's going to be resonant with the audience and also accomplish the business goal. So you're going to do very different things for getting more email newsletter signups than you would for selling more of your product to the same customers, right? Who've already bought from you in the past, right? Like doing a special loyalty sale, or those kinds of things, right? So the problem, I think, is that a huge portion of marketers, agency, consultant, in-house marketers, teams, CMOs, they have their biases around what they do, right? Like I come from an SEO background. I'm a content marketer. I'm an old school journalist type of PR marketer. I do podcasts and YouTube channel marketing. I do paid search marketing. I do, social media advertising. And you bring those biases to the table, and then you start to, like I did, right? You've got your hammer. And so every one of these problems look like a nail. And rather than connect up, all right, this is why this thing we're going to do is going to accomplish this business goal and be appealing to this correct audience. And that's the challenge. It's not just channels, although channels is a big problem and a big part of it. Not just tactics, that's a big problem too. It's not just the message, but all of them.
Yeah.
Alignment, man. It's not, it shouldn't be as hard as it is. But I think the problem is there's no tool to tell you whether your goal is in alignment with your audience and your business, right? There's only experience, intuition, thoughtfulness, care. It's almost like I don't know how to teach those things.
Can some of them be taught?
Can some of them be taught? Good question.
Some of them seem missing on the whole of it. All right. So to start to come to a close here, what is, given some of what we talked about, maybe something coming totally out of left field, given what you see in all your content creation, your audience research, the myriad interactions and conversations of different types that you're having, what is the one big myth you kind of are out to blow up, right? What's the we're talking about blowing up brands. Part of that has got to be blowing up myths. I think we've blown up a couple already so far, but like the numero uno, if I could just blow up this one thing, right? If I could have people unlearn this one thing, this would be a key.
I think that probably the biggest one is that the future of marketing, and even the current, like the present, is going to have to move weirdly away from building very particular advanced methods for attributing every sale and conversion, and toward an experimental measurement style, 20th century style measurement world. And this is, for like 20 years, marketers, myself included, have been getting on stages and on videos and podcasts and blog posts and talking about how you should not, tie your business KPIs to vanity metrics, vanity metrics like followers and impressions and traffic and those kinds of things, right? Instead, you should pay attention to conversions. What was the customer journey before the conversion? Look at all the touch points of the customer journey before the conversion. And that's where you can attribute your actual sales. And the problem is that all the big tech platforms and governments, right, with privacy laws, and consumers with their own behavior and with ad blockers, they have all together made this new world, the 2023 world, where attribution is not just impossible, it's misleading. Like it will always, attribution-focused marketing will always encourage you to spend lots of money on a few big tech platforms that claim they have perfect attribution of, where you contributed. And they will always bias you against organic search and content marketing and social media marketing and community building and word of mouth and PR and email newsletters and getting into other people's publications and going on podcasts, like all of those other forms of marketing that are not just hard to measure, but impossible to attribute, those will be devalued. And I want to bust the myth that you can just throw money at big tech and be successful. What big tech is really good at, the big tech advertising platforms, what they're really good at in most spaces is getting in between a customer who probably was going to buy from you anyway and the end of their journey. They're a middleman, right? They sit between, they're like, oh, we've identified that like Rand really liked this brand of sneakers. We're going to show him the ads for that brand of sneakers. And then when he does buy them, we're going to take credit for it, right? And that is fundamentally different from creating the demand or nudging and encouraging the purchase. I'm not saying advertising doesn't work. That's going too far. But I am saying that if you turn off your ads, in most cases, you will see that 70, 80, 90% of your conversions still come through. So you got to mix it up. You got to be willing to invest in hard to measure, impossible to attribute channels, or you will lose out and you'll just be stuck giving all your margin to big tech ads.
Yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah. It's weird because I always hear people, people are like, oh, but crap. Yeah, that's probably right.
Yeah.
No one's like, no, big tech advertising wouldn't dare be that nefarious. Oh, there's no 10 years ago, people were like, I trust Google with my ad dollars. Now they're like,
yeah. Enough of those reports come out. We're like, oh, now we've adjusted what we said 3 years ago, and now here's the real picture.
Have you been watching the DOJ trial against Google this week at all? I mean, when they had the software engineer from Google, right, testifying like, oh yeah, clicks and click-through rate are like the major thing that we use for rankings, and that's like why we have a competitive advantage over all of our anybody else in the space. And I had this like, man, where were you in 2015 when the whole SEO world was like, we don't believe you, Rand, that Google uses clicks and Damn it.
Well, there you go. Vindication. Vindication, if nothing else. And yeah, big shocker. Big tech has its own interests in mind and not yours.
What? You mean they care about their shareholders at the expense of their customers? No.
Unbelievable. I've never.
Freaking
All right.
late stage capitalism.
Yes, yes. What a glorious world this is. As we talk about the tech companies, and I sit in my apartment with COVID at home.
Oh, so sorry. Well, it is very kind of you to take this time and keep our appointment. And I hope Exene, you get some rest.
Yeah,
And,
thank you, thank you.
Hit the couch. You have a good list of TV shows.
I will.
On the docket.
Yeah, I've been bouncing around. Instagram has been dominating my attention. You know, it's the mutual, it's the back and forth of social that I like, where it's like, yeah, I'm doom scrolling, but also yelling into the internet. So it's the interaction. You know what I'm going to scream about this week? Masking up. What if
Hey,
we
to each their own. I don't know if you checked out the Spider-Verse movies.
You know, that is a good reminder because I keep getting told to, and I
Outstanding.
Yeah,
outstanding. So this is fun reveal. We're actually working with one of the artists who worked on Spider-Verse for the video game, which I'm kind of excited about.
Shit. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Well, yeah, I look forward to seeing how that turns out. We've been doing some video game, very different kind of video game marketing at the agency for a client recently, and we're about to start launching some rollout campaigns, very different models. So yeah, I'm all of a sudden more interested in that kind of marketing and what channels work than I ever was before. And and even in that crowd, a very specific niche audience with some educational goals in the background. So it's an interesting case scenario, and one of those things that does feel a little more like ads. It does feel like this is as quickly as we can get people to notice this game, play it because it's a mindless kind of like puzzle game.
Like mobile games are totally that world.
Yeah, the quicker the better. Show up on the field. That looks fun. Beep boop, and like do your thing. So it's way out of my wheelhouse, but we're, most things are, right. So that's right. That's why
it's funny, right? You can sort of specialize in marketing, which I really recommend, but you're only going to be good at like a few things. No one's ever, oh yeah, I'm great at every kind of marketing.
No. That's why there's a team, right? That's why there's an agency, like different people who do different stuff well. I do messaging and I do strategy and I talk to people live. That's what I do. And then other people figure out channels and actually how to execute on shit, because I could never. But yeah, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you taking the time. It's good to talk with you again. Do you want to let people know where to find you if they're not sure?
Sure. Yeah. So you can check out almost all the stuff that I'm doing that's live, which is at SparkToro.com. You can sign up. There's a forever free account. We don't have a free trial. It's just forever free. And then if you decide you like it, you can upgrade. And I am most active these days on social on Mastodon, where I'm Rand Fish at Mastodon Social, and I like that network a bunch. I've actually been getting a lot of value from it. I also post fairly regularly on LinkedIn as Rand Fishkin.
Excellent. Blue Sky yet?
Haven't joined Blue Sky. No, I'm on Threads technically, but I don't use it very much. I might soon. Now that they have the desktop version, I'm probably going to use it a little more. I don't love mobile for my posting. I don't mind consuming on mobile, but I'm not a great creator on mobile.
Right. Yeah, you just get a different vibe. Okay, I can get that. All right. Well, I will let you go. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
All right, talk soon. My pleasure. Cheers.
Thanks for checking out Blowing Up Brands, brought to you by Renoun Creative. If you dig what we're putting out, follow us on YouTube and your favorite pod platform, and at renouncreative.com. See you soon.